welcome to Wilder's Last Resort. We're filming here today for the quilt show just to show you where the quilt was created for the quilt show, the Laurel Ridge quilt. I'm the grandmother edition and my granddaughter is the granddaughter edition, so come on in. This is the kitchen in the great room, and as you can see, I use every possible thing I can imagine to display a quilt. We spend the majority of our time right in this room. It's pretty cold in the winter time. We've had as much as 4 to 5 feet of snow at one time. So we stay curled up in front of the fire, reading a good book or quilting, and we just totally enjoy living here. So let's go on to the next room. This is my favorite room in the whole house. This is my sewing room. It's a jam-packed small space, but I think what it tells me is that you don't have to have a huge studio to create just a beautiful quilt. I do enjoy this room a lot. And when I iron, I can look out and I have seen a bear or an occasional fox. This quilt hanging up is called Country Charmer. I've made that about 3 times now. This one is called Grammy Squares. And then I have my newest line of fabric called Gentry's Mill here. And then this little pie safe is filled with my other fabric lines actually, Laurel Ridge and Hearthstone. So it's just a cozy little spot that I really do enjoy, and I enjoy sharing it with you, and you knowing that I was going to invite you into my room made me clean it up a lot. So on to the next room. This is the master bedroom, and as you can see, I have quilts hanging all over. I love to display the quilts. I look at them as insulation. I have an old rake that I paid $3 for up there, and I love the bed frame. Is great for hanging quilts. This is Laurel Ridge in all of her glory. You get to see the whole entire quilt, and you get to see our dog Maisie, my faithful sewing companion. She loves to help me. Anyway, what I want you to look at are the circle of stars that go around the center of the quilt, and that is the circle, the community of quilters. They are a very tight-knit group. So that symbolizes the quilters around the world, as many people watching this video are from around the world. It is a late fall here in the United States. It's the end of November, the end of our Thanksgiving weekend. So we still have a bit of color on the trees. We were hoping for some snow, but no snow yet. And then as soon as the snow comes, the leaves are gone. So enjoy the cabin, enjoy making the quilt. If you ever have any questions, you have a lot of support through the quilt show, through the forum, and through the tutorials. Thank you for visiting. Okay, welcome everyone to the quilt show, to month 1 of the Laurel Ridge quilt, and I'm so glad that you're here to join us today. I really want to thank my granddaughter for doing all the filming, and my grandson for helping. I guess we could call him the gaffer or gopher or whatever you call it. Anyway, we're going to be starting with month 1, and I've tried to break it down so that it's easy for you, and we're going to get progressively harder, and then I'll throw in a few easier blocks along the way. So you'll be making approximately 220 5.5-inch blocks. I know it sounds like a lot, but we're going to make it easy for you so that you won't have any problems. All the blocks will go together really well, and then I want you to enjoy the process. So I'm going to start out each tutorial showing the tools that I use. These are recommended. It's not something that you have to buy, but they are very beneficial, and I feel that if I have good tools, then I have good results with my blocks. So I'm using a friction pen. This is called a fabric folding pen, and it comes apart, and you can spray Best Press spray right into the tube, and I'll show you how I use that in a little bit. I love the Quilter Select 5.5-inch square block, which is really essential for this, and the Flying Geese ruler that's 1.5 by 2.5 inches finished. And a 1/4 inch ruler. This is the Omnigrid 1/4 inch ruler. So let's get started. And this is a block. And I'm showing everything in the pastel colorway since I've already made the other quilt, the quilt behind me. So I just have these parts and pieces to work on. So I'm going to show you, going to use these for my demonstration. So you'll also have your directions. So follow along with your directions, make notes as you go. And that's one wonderful thing about the tutorials, that you can watch them over and over if you need to. So you're going to begin by making a strip set. And when I say a strip set, this is the 2 pieces, and this is the inner section of the squareness, or the 4 patch and a star. So you're going to make a strip set, and you're going to be pressing toward the darker colorway. You'll be pressing toward the blue. Then you're going to cut these. I believe it's 1 inch and 3/4 inch with your ruler. You're going to be cutting them, and I might get you a little bit confused because I can cut with either hand. So, you know, I'll be showing you different ways, but you can trim this off, trim your edges off, and then you'll be cutting in 1 3/4 inch sections. And then you'll have 2 parts like this. They've been pressed to the opposite direction so that when you put them together, the seams just nest in perfectly. And I like to have you check them out, and I always use pins. I know there are a lot of quilters that do not use pins, but I always use pins and pin them together. So you can make, you're going to be making 4 of each colorway, so you can prepare your strip sets in each colorway. We've got the blue and we've got the pink. And you can stitch these, you can chain piece all of these together, and then you'll end up with this. And what I like to do is to take my seams apart. I'm just tearing out the stitches right along here, and I flip it over and I tear the stitches out there so that when I open it up, I have a nice flat seam. If your seams are flatter, you're going to have greater success with your block. So this is what it's going to look like. And when I press, I love this pressing tool. So I've just put on a little bit. You can squeeze just a little bit of, I have best press in here, and then I put them right on this pressing tool, and I press the seam down, and it keeps it nice and flat. And then once I press and I'm on at your ironing board, then I put on a clapper, a quilter's clapper, and sometimes I put them both on if they don't want to behave, so that I can just keep them nice and flat. Now we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the next piece of the flying goose. You'll be making a lot of these blocks, so you're going to become very proficient at making these blocks. So you're going to cut your background fabric, and you're going to put on your little wings. So you're going to place them directly on here. And this is when I like to use the 1/4 inch ruler and then my friction pen. And I'm drawing a line, and then always use pins and pin these wings on. And for all of these blocks, you're going to be making 8 of these blocks. You can chain piece them all at the same time. If you tend to run too small, stitch on the inside of the red line. So once you do that, and then you'll be cutting it apart, and you have 2 pieces like so. Now what do you do with it? You place another wing on. So you place another wing on that's been marked. Let's just put it on this one just to be different. And you pin it, and you've marked it. Again, stitch toward the inside. The center of the line. And then you end up, once you do that, then you cut it apart, and you'll end up with 4 identical flying geese. And this is where I like to use the flying goose ruler. See how that fits in perfectly there? And you're most concerned, you don't want to lose your point there, so you want to be able to trim it on all sides. I have a hard time trimming when I'm cutting down. I almost need to stand up. And I guess I should have put in a new blade ahead of time. This is one of the things, the bad things about doing this live is because sometimes you really kind of mess up. But again, the block ruler has a nice little ridge in there that sticks perfectly so that it doesn't slip. And if you have a little round table, little cutting table, you can just twirl it and do all the trimming. And before the next tutorial, I am going to change this blade. And then you trim on the bottom. And you have 4 perfect flying geese. If you don't have a flying goose ruler this size, it's a 1.5 by 2.5 inch finish, you can use any size block ruler as long as you maintain that. So I'm going to, as long as you maintain your 1/4 inch. So I've got my 4, which I'm not going to trim since I don't have a sharp blade. And then I'm going to assemble my block. So I've got my piece that I'm going to put in the center here. And then I'm going to put all my trimmed flying geese around it. Pretend they're trimmed, please. And then I'm going to put my little corner squares. So as you can see, this is a fairly easy block. And it's something that you can easily put together, and then I'm going to put it together in rows. So I would put it together like this and do each row across, and then so this row to the center row and this one also to the center row. And then you have your completed block. One thing that I want to mention, which I forgot to mention in the very beginning, I starch my fabric. I starch it so firmly that you can bounce a 1/4 off of it so that it's very firm. It doesn't ravel as much. You get nice seams that you can press open that stay. Well, you can see where I didn't do a good job there, but oh well, I'm not perfect. So, but you can see where everything lines up perfectly. I've not lost any of my points, and that's what's important here. So I use faultless spray starch, where I would cut off a section of, since you have kits, I would cut off a small section that equals what you need to cut and spray that. Let it dry completely before you press, because if you press starch fabric that's still wet, you are going to distort it, and you do not want to do that. So I've got my nice little block here, and I have to admit that my sister made the majority of these blocks for me. And I want to show you something on, if it doesn't work out perfectly, how you can block your block so that it does work perfectly. So this is a piece of paper that I use, the cut right paper that I also use for my applique, and I put this on a Teflon surface. If this block didn't fit here, because this is a 5-inch piece of cut right paper, I would thoroughly spray this block till it's basically soaking wet, and then, excuse me, do a lot of pins. I would probably do, for 6-7 pins on each side. And then, so I would put pins along all sides, walk away from it, even wait till the next day, and your block will be perfectly blocked and will fit in that 5.5-inch square. And you'll just be amazed and so happy. I had a friend who did a block that it was a little skewed, and we thought, let's try it. And it was at a retreat, and we just thoroughly soaked the block. We blocked it like this on a piece of paper. I think it was a 9 or 10-inch block. And by the next day, she had a perfectly usable block. So remember, if there's any questions that you have, you can put them on the forum and I will answer them, or Barbara will answer them, or you can send me an email. And this is your first month. You only need to make 8 blocks, so you won't have any difficulty with that at all. So remember, thank you for joining us, and it's a great day every day.